Coronavirus danger had already peaked are being proven wrong again. The news is that this virus has now infected more people than the deadly SARS virus. It's really getting scary, especially when you consider that a city as big and as populous as New York is completely quarantined and essentially shut down. Think about that. That's how big this city, Wuhan, is. We're talking about this city which has a population of 12 million people. Wuhan. This is not a small town that we're talking about.
It started in a seafood market in China and it's spreading across the world. Here is what we know about the new coronavirus that's freaking out medical experts and governments. The Wuhan coronavirus is a mysterious strain and we know very little about it, except that it's deadly and it can be transmitted from human to human. Scientists are calling it novel coronavirus or nCoV 2019. Coronaviruses are fairly common in species of animals. But this specific virus was traced back to a seafood market in the city of Wuhan, where a number of wildlife animals are sold illegally. One theory is that it started in bats, then spread to snakes, possibly sold at the market, and moved on to humans. Chinese authorities have since imposed a nationwide ban on wildlife trade in markets, supermarkets, restaurants, and e-commerce platforms. But it was a little too late as it had already been transmitted to humans. The novel coronavirus can spread from an infected person to others through the air, by coughing or sneezing, close personal contact such as touching or shaking hands, touching an object or surface exposed to the virus, then touching your mouth or nose before washing your hands. But the biggest threat is the mobility of the people who have been infected. Initially, the majority of those infected were from Wuhan or have recently traveled to Wuhan. But in less than a week, cases have already been reported in at least 18 countries, including South Korea, Japan, Singapore, France, Germany, Canada, and the US. Authorities in China and other countries are implementing measures to prevent its spread.
To get a better idea of how the coronavirus is having an impact on communities closer to the epicenter in Wuhan and Hubei province, we took a southbound train from Beijing. We got off in central Henan province. Its southern border with Hubei covers more than 400 kilometers, the longest of any other province. And the spreading of the virus is a big and sensitive concern. As we were about to exit the station, we were met by a local government official. He knew we were coming and told the local police our plan.
They're still trying to go to Changyuan. I told them they can't pass the checkpoint. They have to go back to Beijing.
But they said they wouldn't stop us. Instead, they would follow us until we reached the checkpoint to the community we wanted to visit.
The sign says all the cars stop for check.
We're about an hour away from the train station, the Changyuan exit from the freeway. This is described as the medical supply capital of China. So we wanted to go in because the face masks are manufactured there. More than 50% for China are manufactured inside. And we've heard that they've brought the staff back from their holiday early to manufacture more face masks. But it's so sensitive, they're stopping us here, not even letting us go inside.
We were not the only ones being turned away. Other cars were prevented from going in if they could not prove that they were from Chongyang. And then we were told by the official that if we did not leave Henan province before the end of the day, it was highly likely that we would be put in quarantine. As the end of the extended holiday draws closer, many people in these communities could be cut off even longer if additional transportation restrictions are put into place. Scott Heiler.
Controversial plan to go into outer space as a private enterprise has apparently passed another hurdle. It's called SpaceX, and today it successfully launched a fourth batch of satellites into orbit. It now seems to have a veritable constellation of satellites dotting the sky and raising concerns about how far the company wants to go. RT correspondent John Huddy has more on this one.
The Falcon 9 rocket lifted off from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida just after 9 this morning, carrying with it 60 more Starlink satellites for SpaceX's growing constellation of satellites in orbit, the second such launch by the company this month. And following the launch, the rocket's first stage touched down on the SpaceX drone ship landing platform in the Atlantic Ocean, marking the company's 49th booster recovery. Today's mission is part of SpaceX's Starlink program that aims to deploy the world's most advanced broadband internet system, according to the company's website. But not everyone is thrilled with the hundreds of satellites SpaceX is firing up into space. Astronomers have raised concerns about the satellites interfering with scientific observations, and others have questioned whether they'll pose possible dangers to other space missions, or at least litter space with more man-made objects and ultimately a lot of man-made junk. SpaceX CEO and founder Elon Musk says the company will need at least 400 satellites in orbit to provide minimal coverage and at least 800 to provide moderate coverage. With this latest launch, the company is halfway to the minimal coverage mark, with 240 satellites in orbit, and says service could begin sometime this year, with the US and Canada receiving the first portions of coverage and the rest of the world by 2021. SpaceX writes on its website that, at end of life, the satellites will utilize their onboard propulsion system to deorbit over the course of a few months. In the unlikely event the propulsion system becomes inoperable, the satellites will burn up in the Earth's atmosphere within 1 to 5 years, significantly less than the hundreds or thousands of years required at higher
It was a surprise announcement, but not an unwelcome one. Unlike Vladimir Putin, his longtime ally Dmitry Medvedev was widely unpopular, and many residents of Moscow say they're not sad to see the prime minister and his cabinet go.
The young generation, people living in and around Moscow, are happy about Medvedev's resignation. We hope that he will be replaced by a more dignified person who will have a more responsible attitude towards his job and his words.
I view it positively. Perhaps things will change for the better in our country. People are quite tired of the suffering.
Medvedev submitted his resignation just hours after Putin proposed changing Russia's constitution, shifting powers away from the presidency and giving parliament the authority to name the prime minister. Some see the move as a way to carve out new leadership positions for Putin when he is forced to leave the presidency at the end of his term in 2024.
To be honest, the news surprised me. But at the same time, it's quite obvious that this is all about the upcoming elections and the need to reconfigure the structure of government in order to keep President Vladimir Putin in power.
Putin named the little-known chief of Russia's tax service, Mikhail Mishustin, as his new prime minister. Parliament is set to approve the choice on Thursday. Meanwhile, there's no timeline yet for the constitutional reform, which would need to be adopted in a nationwide vote.
Long lines of people waiting to get government help. This is happening in Lomas de Zamora, only half an hour away from the center of Buenos Aires. This is just one of the places in the country where the new government of Alberto Fernández has launched a program to fight malnutrition. Santiago Tassin has 4 children and has been without work for a year.
It's a compliment to help us. During these past 4 years, we have seen an increase in prices and it's difficult to make sure the kids eat well. We buy a lot of pasta and rice and they need meat, fish and protein.
In the past year, the devaluation of the peso currency has had a strong impact on the price of food. Many of those coming here are already receiving government help. This card gives them between $50 and $90 extra a month to buy only certain food items.
My husband has some temporary work, but I don't, and this helps a lot with some basic items.
The government hopes to distribute over 560,000 cards to help cope with rising malnutrition in the province. On site, children can get vaccinated. And there is a nutrition expert that teaches people how to eat smart.
We are telling people what they should buy once they get the card. We talk to them about what type of food their children need. We ask them to buy fruit, vegetables, meat and milk. We see children who are not big enough and others who are overweight. We are trying to educate them that they shouldn't buy sugary drinks that do not add to their diet.
The government also hopes that these food cards will help reactivate Argentina's economy that is already struggling with recession and inflation. And even though these food cards will certainly help lots of families here that are currently struggling with the economic crisis, most analysts say that the program won't help solve Argentina's endemic incapacity to generate jobs.
Laura Alonso says the program will inject almost $9 billion in the economy a year.
We're in an emergency trying to allow families to buy basic needs, but the objective, as the President said, is to change the economic structure in the country, to be able to generate jobs. That is what the country needs. By activating the economy, we will generate consumption and hopefully economic prosperity.
On an emergency meeting tomorrow to determine whether the coronavirus outbreak is yet considered a public health emergency, as the total number of people infected so far are now surpassed those infected with the SARS epidemic. Rick, so far more than 6,000 cases have been confirmed in China, and with thousands more suspected. Now here's a breakdown of those infected with the virus so far. The death toll is currently at 132 in China, with over 6,000 confirmed cases of the infection, 1,000 increase just from yesterday, and 68 new cases have been reported outside of China, with 3 countries who have reported person-to-person transmission of the virus, since it's so easy to transmit the virus to someone without actually showing any kind of symptoms. And the first case in the Middle East has also been reported in the UAE, and Hong Kong and Australia have both reported 2 new cases just today. There's also been confirmed cases in South Korea, Japan, Nepal, Cambodia, Singapore, Vietnam, Taiwan, Sri Lanka, Canada, and France. And although there's been no confirmed cases in North Korea, the country is calling the coronavirus a matter of national existence. And in the U.S., a Washington man was diagnosed with the virus several days after his arrival from Wuhan, while a woman in Chicago was diagnosed with the virus. And just this past Sunday, 3 new confirmed cases were reported, 1 in Arizona and 2 in California, which brings the U.S. total to 5 so far. And Rick, yesterday about 200 U.S. citizens were evacuated from Wuhan and landed in California this morning. The U.S. government chartered a plane to fly out diplomats along with other Americans from the U.S. consulate in Wuhan, and officials say that the American evacuees are undergoing 3 days of monitoring at a California military base to ensure they show no signs of the illness.